This is Gridiron Graduates, a weekly podcast covering all things football. Episode 69, I Don't Get It. Recorded April 20th, 2017.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Gridiron Graduates hitting you guys back up. Welcome back. Hope you guys had a good week. Bill Rossetti here with Ian Wharton, as always. The dynamic duo getting back together with just 9 days at the time of this recording until the NFL draft. So just 2 episodes here left. We got one more pair of divisions to go over, and we're pretty much ready to go, man. Ian, how you doing, brother?
Doing good, man. Doing good. It's almost over. It's kind of that rough part of the year where just the sheer amount of rumors that come at us. I mean, we hear multiple conflicting things even in the same day, and this happens every year. So, it's one of those things where this part of the year I'm pretty worn out by it. But that all being said, it's also a fun time of year too, because just getting really excited, man. Getting really excited for the draft and everything that happens after it, and all that work ends up paying off here soon.
Can't wait, man. Can't wait. So, yeah, like I said, draft coming up. Got other good things going on. Ian's Cavs are doing pretty well so far in the playoffs. Stanley Cup playoffs are going on if you're into that. Baseball just got underway, so a lot of good stuff going on. So it's a good time of year. But I think we have to start the show. I mean, this is going to be a bit of a somber note, obviously, but it's obviously the big story of the day, at least the day of this recording, Wednesday, and that, of course, was the finding of former Patriots tight end Aaron Hernandez found dead in his cell. Hernandez, of course, was serving a life sentence for the murder of Odin Lloyd. He had just been found not guilty, though, of the 2012 double murder, but again, serving the life sentence. Real shame how this all happened. It was quite a series of events, to say the least. Some very unfortunate for his family and the victims here. Just a wild story to wake up to this morning.
Yeah. I mean, it's sad for obviously the victim, the victim's family, and don't want to forget them in all of this. The Aaron Hernandez, just like the whole saga, it's just unbelievable. It's really unbelievable, and he went out in a way that's really, just sad. It's just sad all around. It's sad for all parties involved, and we saw one of the Pouncey brothers post a little video. Yeah, obviously they were good friends. Both of the brothers were good friends with him, and they supported him through a lot of it, and I give them props. I can't imagine. Yeah, I can't imagine a friend, being found guilty of that, being even accused of that is just horrifying to begin with, and hopefully, I don't know, man. That's something that'll never be fixed, but a very sad day in the NFL, and especially for the victims, not really for Aaron Hernandez himself. I mean, he picked a way to go out that's, you could argue is pretty cowardly, but, it is what it is, and hopefully the family will find peace in it.
Yeah, so just a crazy ending, really, to what was a very, like I said, very eventful story. So, again, thoughts to his family, his 4-year-old daughter. Unfortunate they have to go through this. So with that, I guess we'll kind of try to turn it around here, perk things up a bit, I guess. Get into a little bit of news and notes. We'll talk about a report that we just saw that Ian actually brought up right before we started recording here. Our buddy Ben Albright, good man, fun follow on Twitter. He's reporting he believes that Christian McCaffrey is a lock to be selected in the top 10, which would be, obviously no one's really talking about him in the top 10, so I think for a few people it's going to be quite a surprise. But what do you think? Can you see McCaffrey going top 10? Obviously a team like the Panthers can use running back help. That would probably be the most likely destination if he goes top 10. But, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the hashtag he used was hashtag Panthers. And, that does seem to make the most sense. And I think this would really be a fun matchup of talent. And I talked about earlier in the draft process. I actually talked about it last year. Would have liked to have seen Derrick Henry land with the Panthers just because of his power style. And then I talked about Leonard Fournette ended up somehow landing with the Panthers. And I don't think that's going to happen. I think you can pretty much take it to the bank that Fournette's going to be going to the Jaguars unless if something crazy happens at 2 and 3. As we get closer to the draft, the things that I keep hearing, you're going to hear a lot of rumors. I just know that I've heard these from multiple, not only reporters, but also some guys in the NFL that I really trust that have led me pretty well over the last couple of years. I think Solomon Thomas will be the pick at 2. I think Jonathan Allen will be the pick at 3. And then Leonard Fournette will be at 4. And then things really get crazy at 5. That's where there's not a whole lot of known, because I think that's going to be the trade range for quarterbacks. Buffalo wants to get Mitch Trubisky, Cleveland wants Mitch Trubisky, so that's where it starts to get adventurous. And but yeah, coming back to McCaffrey, you're right. I think that you start to probably consider him at I guess the Jaguars. You could. I mean, he'd be a real wild card there, but I mean, that would be the shock of the draft. I think as surprising as John Allen would be at 3 after considering his shoulder injuries, I think the shocking thing would be Fournette not being the first running back off the board. So I think that's pretty safe. But then I think McCaffrey, you start to look at maybe at 7 to San Diego, but I really think the conversation is going to be there at 8 for Carolina. Cincinnati would be an interesting fit as well. And I also think Buffalo would make sense. I think that's really the 3 teams. They could make a good argument for why they would draft him. And 2 of those teams, well, I mean, really all 3 of them, you're getting a fantastic receiver as well as a great running back. And the Bengals would make sense in the fact that Gio Bernard and Jeremy Hill, neither of them have played well. They didn't play well last year, and Hill hasn't played well since his rookie year. I think Hill's a guy they need to replace. Carolina, they could use a slot receiver, and they could use another running back. Obviously, McCaffrey's fantastic in every role that he's played, so there's no reason why he can't help fill those 2 roles. And then, same for Buffalo. Buffalo is still looking for receiver help as well. So, it makes sense. It seems rich, but look how dominant this guy was in the Pac-12 for multiple years. It's not like this guy's a one-hit wonder. I think he's a phenomenal player. I really do. He's one of my favorite players in this class. I have him as running back 4, but even as I say that, it doesn't mean he's not like a first-round caliber player to me. So, I'd be really, really happy if he goes to Carolina, just because of how fun I think that would be.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in an offense like that that's very run-oriented. And you're going to need someone eventually to replace Jonathan Stewart. I mean, Stewart can obviously still run pretty well, but the injury history is well accustomed, and he is kind of getting up there in age a little bit. So, depends how they feel about guys like Fozzie Whitaker and Cameron Artis-Payne, but I think McCaffrey could certainly be that bell cow back, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road for Carolina if he goes there. I do like that. I am intrigued by the other two options you brought up, Cincinnati and Buffalo. I believe Gio Bernard is entering a contract year with
Yep.
the Bengals, so that could be a decision there if they grab McCaffrey, could make Bernard expendable. And like you said, Hill has kind of been up and down the last couple of years. He had this fantastic rookie year, but he has kind of plateaued a little bit, I guess. And then Buffalo, could use someone behind LaShawn McCoy, and again another guy that's kind of getting up there in age a little bit as well. So certainly three intriguing options, I think, for sure. Something else that was brought up today was the Browns potentially moving up from number 12. Ideally, or likely, the trade target would be Mitchell Trubisky. Now, how high they have to get up, we've talked in the past. You mentioned 5 is probably a target to if you want to get Trubisky, because you want to get ahead of the Jets to ensure that you get Trubisky. So, and what are they saying? Cleveland won't announce their top pick until the draft, even though, let's be honest, they'll say that they're considering Trubisky and Garrett, but I mean, anybody can figure out that it's going to be it has to be Myles Garrett at number 1.
Yeah.
So, and they could easily come away in this draft with Garrett and Mitchell Trubisky. Like, they can easily flip one of their second round picks to say, trying to remember who's at number 5. Oh yeah, Tennessee, for the 5th pick. It's not like it would cost them a lot to get from 12 to 5.
Yeah, and they may not even have to go that high. I mean, Buffalo may be the only team that they have to jump. And, if that's the case, well, then all of a sudden this is a whole lot easier than, I think the bidding maybe starts at 5 or 6, but they may not have to go that high. And, if they can even jump up just to with Carolina, and maybe say, hey, Carolina, you guys can get Christian McCaffrey here at 12. And again, this is going to be based off of intel. This is going to be based off of teams, knowing the market and understanding, what other teams and where they want to go and how they view this class. And that's a part of being a good general manager and employing the staff that can, handle that. But the Browns may not have to go that high. And if they don't have to, even if they do have to, like you mentioned, they've got the assets to do it. Who cares? If they use the extra second-round pick they got for Brock Osweiler and a second-round pick that they have extra this year, okay. I mean, no one's going to care about that if you walk away from this with your quarterback and Myles Garrett in this class. So, absolutely, I think the Browns have to be the odds-on favorite to be the team to move up and get the guy that they want.
So, so let's jump into our final set of division previews, I guess. Because, I mean, let's be honest. At this point, there's really not much. There really hasn't been much news in the last week, anyway, has there?
No, not really. I mean, it's been, the free agency has been, kind of done.
Yep.
And at this point, it's really just the draft, and then after the draft, we'll have another small bout of free agency, and then that's about it. I mean, it'll be time to play.
And speaking of playing, of course, schedule comes out this week, so all you travel buffs out there can get your plans ready for later in the year. So that'll be a fun time for you guys. So let's jump into it. Final set of our division previews. We'll start in the AFC West. Excuse me. We'll start with the Kansas City Chiefs, who are picking, I believe, at 28 in round 1. And there's been a little bit of rumors that they could be in play for a quarterback. They seem to be kind of a wild card pick to take one of the quarterbacks in the first round. We'll just start there. Like, what's your take there on the possibility of Kansas City taking a round 1 quarterback?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. If they get the chance to get one of the top 4, and as we get closer, I tend to think that these guys aren't going to go as high as maybe as we thought. And it's not because I don't think the league doesn't like them. I think it's just because you look at the teams that need to pick them, they don't really have the time to invest in a rookie quarterback and start them right away. Chicago doesn't really have the time and ability to do that. San Francisco seems to be more worried about building a strong team and then maybe playing for Kirk Cousins next year. Houston, they're in a year that they may need to just win. And you could argue that, yeah, depending on who's on the board there, maybe there'll be an upgrade on Tom Savage. They probably will be, but maybe they have a plan for Tony Romo, and their plan is to Cutler or Kaepernick, whatever it is. They may have a veteran plan. So you look at all these teams and you're saying, well, okay, if we're crossing these teams off the list, there's a good chance that Kaiser or Mahomes or Watson is there in the late 20s. And specifically Kaiser. I think Kaiser will probably fall to the late first or the second round. That's actually a prop bet out there, and I would probably bet that he goes in the second, which is crazy to me, but I understand it as well. I just understand that that's how the NFL values those types of guys, and so I'm looking at the Chiefs, and I'm saying, well, their number one thing that holds them back every year is Alex Smith. It just is. They have other weaknesses at linebacker. You could argue corner. They could use another one, even though Terrence Mitchell played pretty well down the stretch for them. You still want to add another talented body to that mix. You could use someone next to Ramek Wilson as the inside linebacker, number 2 for that job. Heck, you need to make sure that you lock down the starting job. The number 1 middle linebacker there, just because you look at the injuries that Derek Johnson has suffered, and who knows if he can finish the season at this point. You could always use another edge rusher, although I don't think that's a priority. Tom Bali's getting older. D Ford looked like he played pretty decently last year, so maybe you're not too worried about that. You could use maybe some more offensive line help too. Obviously not like a high pick, but maybe start looking at depth at guard. Maybe being a concern. So there's a lot of needs here, but it always comes back to quarterback. And if you had a better quarterback, a lot of these needs are secondary type needs. And so I think Patrick Mahomes has been a guy that's been kind of linked to them. I think Mahomes will be off the board by then, but he would make a lot of sense if he's there. And I think Deshaun Watson would actually be a guy who makes sense. Although I do think Watson is similar to Alex Smith. I do think he's a little bit more willing to go downfield and attack certain matchups that would benefit those receivers and maybe heighten the play of that offense overall. Although I do think he is somewhat limited in the same sense that Smith is. But that's what you're going to get late in the first round is, you're not always going to get the guy dripping with upside. Kaiser, I don't think Kaiser would be a great fit, although he's more talented than the guys I mentioned. Not necessarily Mahomes, but Watson. I think he's more talented than Watson, but he's also a guy that's further away, and he's not really a guy that operates in that same type of offense. So I think that quarterback has to be their concern. The question is, how much do they leverage to get one? Are they willing to trade up? Are they willing to trade significant assets? Because it's not like they have a bunch of extra assets like some of these other teams that may be looking to move up ahead of them.
I was checking quick your draft guide because I know you've compared a lot of these players to current NFL players. You had Deshaun compared to. I just wanted to see if it was Alex Smith or not. But you had him as an athletic Andy Dalton.
Yeah, Deshaun Watson. Yeah, and I've seen people link the two, Watson and Alex Smith, and I actually see that. I do see that. I didn't want to go with that because I feel like a lot of quarterbacks every year get linked to Alex Smith. Because it's kind of convenient because he's more of like a limited quarterback, but he's effective enough in his role. Yeah, so it makes sense why people compare them. But I went with Dalton. It's a similar type of player.
And something real quick before we continue with the teams, because we have a little bit of time, I think, too. What has happened to the stock of Deshaun Kaiser? I mean, it felt like a couple months ago this guy seemed to be a lock for the first round, and now, as you just mentioned, it seems like he could fall into round 2. What's happened over the last couple of weeks that's seemingly caused Kaiser to fall down boards?
Yeah, it's hard to say. We've seen Mahomes rising and we've seen Kaiser dropping, which to me could say that when these teams are getting these guys into one-on-one interviews or team interviews, they're getting them on the whiteboard. They're probably finding that Mahomes is more advanced than what they had thought, which makes sense. He's coming from a quarterback led team. Cliff Kingsbury, obviously, he played in the NFL. He's been prepping this quarterback for the NFL. So it's not like he's coming from a system that's just 1 or 2 word play calls. Doug Farrar, the VR team, had a great interview with Patrick Mahomes on this, and you definitely recommend that piece to see. You kind of hear Mahomes talk about some of this stuff, and it's not like he's a raw quarterback. I think he's going to have a pretty easy transition mentally to the NFL. Relatively speaking. And then you compare that to Deshaun Kaiser. Well, maybe Kaiser didn't do as well, or maybe Kaiser, Notre Dame and Michigan State both have this reputation and this history of trashing players on the way out. And Brian Kelly's done it. He's done it for multiple players. It's a bad look, but it is what it is, and that's what he's decided to do. And you look at Kaiser, and maybe he's not. This is like Teddy Bridgewater. Was it maybe true? What things are being said about him? Maybe they're not though. Maybe he's not doing great in the interviews. Maybe he's not coming off as super confident. Maybe he's not coming off as very developed. He only played in 25 games, which is less than Mitch Trubisky. Now, granted, he started a lot and he started more, but he was still yanked around. And his film is a little bit inconsistent. So, I think you can point to some of the issues. Again, I'm going to put the trust in the talent, but there's definitely a downside to him. And I think that of all those quarterbacks, you could argue he maybe has the highest upside, but also the lowest downside too. Like, just based off of like confidence and consistency. Now, he has a tremendous skill set, but if he doesn't hone it in, you could see him potentially being out of the league in maybe 5 to 7 years. I've heard someone say, well, he's kind of like Josh Freeman, and whether that's true or not, who knows? But to me, he's more like Donovan McNabb type of quarterback, like that Big Ben, that type of quarterback where you're going to get a lot of special plays out of these guys. But the margin for error and that line between becoming those 2 levels of quarterbacks is really not that far. The NFL really is not a game that rewards those slight differences, and sometimes the differences between being really good and just really, really bad is slight. So the team's got to have trust in him, and if they don't trust him, to be an impact player in the first 2-3 years, they're probably not going to draft him in the first. But it doesn't mean he won't be successful in the second. Obviously, we saw that with Derek Carr. He's obviously been extremely successful. So it's tough. It's hard to separate these guys from their situations sometimes too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's jump back in here. We'll go to the Raiders now, and Raiders have been another team that have been pegged a little bit to running back. I'm just looking at the roster right now, and one thing that kind of stands out to me, at least on the our lads roster, they only have 2 defensive tackles listed right now, Darius Latham and Justin Ellis. So, certainly makes sense that they could go after a D tackle at some point in the draft. Probably could still go running back even if they do land Marshawn Lynch, which we expect to happen pretty soon. Maybe some help in the secondary, just depth pieces, I guess, all over. Because again, this is another team I think that's certainly ready to compete. Just maybe add a couple pieces, as Derek Carr continues to develop, Amari Cooper. So just maybe a couple weapons for him. They did bring in Jared Cook from Green Bay, so all about building the offense, I think, at this point, because the defense is pretty solid. But what are you thinking here with Oakland?
Yeah, I'm actually a little bit more concerned about this defense. The offensive line is set. They could use another receiver. They could use another running back. But I think in this class, maybe you're going to maybe take those needs on day 3, maybe late day 2, kind of take more of a value who's fallen, especially if Lynch is a done deal, which it seems like it's just a matter of time. Yeah. I think you can kind of wait on those positions, but I think you're right. They need another defensive lineman. They got to get some more depth down there, so maybe that's a day 2 pick. I'm worried about their linebackers. They don't have any good linebackers, middle linebackers specifically. I'm looking at them. Ben Heaney, he was a late round pick. Tyrell Adams, Nerion Ball, Corey James. These aren't, Jelani Jenkins. He was a guy that couldn't cut it really in Miami because of injuries and inconsistency. Maybe he bounces back and becomes a starter for them, but they still need a middle linebacker. So, to me, they need a linebacker pretty badly. I think Raekwon McMillan from Ohio State would make a lot of sense for them. And they also need corner help, too. They don't really have anyone outside of David Amerson and Sean Smith. And quite frankly, I don't think either of those guys are guys that you want to count on past 2017. Like, Amerson's deal you can get out of, and I don't think he's really a good starting corner. And Sean Smith, he looked aged last year. And if he continues to age, that's going to be pretty bad. So he's decent. He's not a bad starter. But again, though, when does that drop off come? Because if it comes and it comes as hard as it flashed last year, he may be out of Oakland after next year. So I think your first 2 or 3 picks really need to address that linebacker and corner position, and then you can really start looking up and saying, okay, now we just need depth.
Denver Broncos have been another team that have been in the quarterback discussion. They're certainly in the Tony Romo sweepstakes. Now they're kind of backtracking a bit, saying, Simeon's their guy, Paxton Lynch going to compete. Could they possibly be a team that looks first-round quarterback, even though they just took a first-round quarterback last year in Paxton Lynch? Especially now with the reports coming out that, they're not fond of his work ethic or something like that?
Yeah, I can't see that. That would be unprecedented. This is too good of an organization to give up on Paxton Lynch yet. And I do think Lynch will win this job. I think he'll win it here in 2017. And they seem to want to really slow cook him last year. And they drafted him knowing that he would take extra time, which is fine. As long as that's the organizational plan, that's fine. Obviously, you don't want to enter next year with Simeon as your starter, but I still think that they are a team that could bring in a veteran for 1 year and just kind of, give Lynch one more season to really get ready. But even if, I have more confidence that he's going to be ready this year. For them, they really got to continue working on their offensive line. The offensive tackle situation is pretty poor. Donald Stevenson, Tyson Braylow, Menelik Watson, those are not starting caliber tackles in the NFL. Stevenson flashes it, but it's not consistent. Sombrello was really bad when he played. He might move to guard to be more of a depth piece or just like a swing backup tackle, but you don't want him playing. So they could use a tackle. They could maybe use a slot receiver. That's not going to be something you're going to worry about right away. Could use help at tight end potentially. Probably not to like the latter rounds. Hopefully Jeff Hireman from Ohio State. He was missed last year with the torn ACL. Hopefully he comes back healthy. He was a good prospect before he got hurt. But really defensively, they need a nose tackle. They could use another backup pass rusher, and they could probably use another cornerback. Obviously not a high pick, but a late round pick. You want to build some more of that depth up. They lost Kayvon Webster, and he's a good special teamer, so they could use some help there. So there's some small needs for them. I think Dalvin Tomlinson in the second round would look really good at nose tackle. Offensive tackle, Garrett Bowles, I think, is a big target for them. I don't think they have a chance of getting him, though. Maybe Cam Robinson, Taylor Moton, those types of guys. Maybe even trading out of the first round completely to get some value and get one of those names.
The Los Angeles Chargers. Still kind of odd saying that again. You had just mentioned them as a possibility, maybe a wild card to take Christian McCaffrey, which that'd be a fun duo. I think him and Melvin Gordon, if they go that way. Malik Hooker, though, seems to be the guy that's really been pegged to the Chargers, and understandable because this team is in dire need of a safety. You know, you could tell that losing Eric Weddle was big time. They really missed him, and so it makes sense. The best safety in the class, and so they franchised Melvin Ingram, so that locked up their pass rush. Joey Bosa obviously was a big time hit for them, so that was big. Maybe could use some line help, because this was a team that certainly was riddled with injuries over the last couple of years, especially along the offensive line. So you like to see a little bit more stability if you can. I think the defense is really where you're going to want to try to plug things up here if you're the Chargers.
Yeah, for sure. They could use offensive line help, and unfortunately for them, it's just not a great draft to do that. It's not a great situation to do that at 7. Now, maybe they want to pull the trigger on a guy like Garrett Bowles. Garrett Bowles, I think, will go higher than most expect. I don't know how high that is. Maybe that's 6 to the Jets. Maybe that's 7 to the Chargers. He's a guy who could theoretically move inside the guard. He's a guy, Joe Barksdale's not great at right tackle. Maybe you just cut your losses on Barksdale, or move Barksdale inside the guard and move Bowles to right tackle. But other than that, though, I think safety is probably the overwhelming favorite at the position to be taken. It makes sense. Hooker would make so much sense for this team. But I also think a guy like Charles Harris would make a lot of sense as well. They need one more edge player. They could use a defensive end as well. I think defensive end would make sense. Corey Liggett is a pretty bad defensive end. Now, if John Allen is somehow still on the board, that would make a lot of sense too. So, and it just kind of depends on what they want that position to do. If they want a pass rusher there at defensive end, then Allen makes a lot of sense. If they want more of a gap eater, like most 3-4 fronts do, opposite of Bosa, then okay, then you could probably wait till day 2 on that role. So they've got options. They're sitting in a good spot to get someone that falls to them. It's just hard because we don't know who is going to go ahead of him. It's a pretty unpredictable draft in that regard. But I like where they're sitting to get a great value.
Let's jump over to the NFC side now. We'll start with the Seahawks. And it feels like every year we talk about the Seahawks and the offensive line, but I think here we are once again needing to talk Seahawks and offensive line because the O-line still wasn't the greatest. Although they did bring in Adore Bushi, though I think they probably want to move Jermaine Ifedi. Do they want to move him to right tackle, or have they
Yeah, so he's
Yeah, I thought
officially
so.
going to go back to right tackle.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So that'll help. So that'll be, you know, hopefully a little bit of better return now on their first round pick. They did bring in Lou Jokel, but you know, how confident can you really be in Jokel after he kind of flattened out a bit in Jacksonville? You know, maybe a change of scenery will do him good, but we'll see. Um, you know, obviously brought in Eddie Lacy in free agency. Still have guys like Thomas Rawls and CJ Procise. Is it crazy though to start talking about, you know, for as good as for how long and how good this cornerback or this secondary has been? Is it too early to start talking about them needing to take secondary help early in the draft?
No, that's a great question, and I think that's going to be where they should go. I think that's really where I'm at with this. Yeah, they definitely need offensive line help. They definitely could use a guard. They could, stand to use maybe even another tackle. I think that's perfectly fair because, as you mentioned, it's not like Jokel's been reliable. So why wouldn't they entertain taking him? So I think that should be something in their back of their minds is to get more depth just along that. Just continue to pump talent in there. You know, they spent 6th round pick last year, a 3rd round pick last year, 4th round pick the year before that, 1st round pick last year, 2nd round pick on Justin Britt a couple years ago. So it's like, they've put a lot of resources into it. They just haven't taken good players. That's the big part of it. Big problem here is Justin Britt and Jermaine Ifedi. It's I like Ifedi and I liked that pick of him, but for them to move him all around and stuff is bad. That's just bad. It's a bad coaching job. It's not having a plan for him. So I do like the idea of taking a corner though. Jashawn Sheed, Jeremy Lane. These are guys that shouldn't be starting. They shouldn't be getting huge snaps. They signed Parrish Cox. They continue to sign bad veterans in hopes to maybe squeeze one good year out of them. Now, I'll say this, Pierre Desir, he's a guy I really liked, and I'm going to continue to go to bat for him. I hope he's going to get a chance this year. I know talked with his agent. He feels like he is going to get a chance this year to play corner. He's a very talented player. He's long. He's a really solid cover man. To be honest, I don't know why he hasn't gotten more of a chance at other places. I know teams like him, but they for some reason he just hasn't had the opportunities. And it is what it is. So I think they've got an opportunity to unearth a gem with him, and so we'll see if that ends up sticking. But absolutely, if they can invest a 1st or 2nd round pick into cornerback, I think it would serve them well.
It feels like it's kind of quarterback day here for us because we're getting to yet another team that's had quarterback talks, at least when it comes to draft Twitter and the media, projecting all these picks. But, I mean, Carson Palmer is mid to late 30s, so I think it's getting close to time for the Cardinals to start looking quarterback. Could that be in the 1st round? Possibly. They're going to be in position where they can take one of the big 4, as it were. Other spots, I think they're another team that could probably use offensive line help. Maybe linebacker. You've got an aging, although he still hasn't been that bad, but an aging Carlos Dansby in the middle there. Probably could use some help along the defensive line. So, again, I think another team that can probably work on the defense a little bit, offensive line, but quarterback is certainly, or at least the quarterback of the future is probably going to be toward the top of the priority list here if you're Arizona.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you definitely need cornerback help and quarterback help. And those are really going to be your top 2 focuses. Could use a guard. They don't really have a great number 2 right guard situation. Receiver, they could use help at. So, this team definitely has a couple of boxes that they need to check off. I would look at corner and quarterback first, just because those are premium positions, and then somewhere on day 2, add some depth on that offensive line and wide receiving core.
And I think we're probably looking at DJ Humphries now, going to be the starting left tackle in Arizona. I think they're going to switch the 2 tackles. Humphrey looks like he's going to move to left, and Veldheer is going to kick over to the right side. So like you said, it's offensive line, because Veldheer's getting up in age, so we're probably going to need someone at least as a swing tackle at some point. And right now, at least how it's listed on our lads, you've got Cole Toner as the starting right guard, 5th round pick last year. So, and this was a team that invested a couple mid-round picks on the interior offensive line last season. Toner was a 5th round pick. Evan Bohm was a 4th round pick. So, at least get some depth in there, get some competition. Got to get some protection on whoever the quarterback is going to be, at least this year, probably Palmer, then down the line, whoever that may be. Back to Los Angeles and the LA Rams, who are in a pretty weak position, I think, because, for one, obviously the main reason is they got shafted, so to speak, on the trade last season for Jared Goff, because it's now left them without a 1st round pick, which would have been a top 5 pick had they still had it. So they don't pick at least until round 2, but they're in an interesting position, because again, I think this is a team that certainly needs a lot of talent help. Probably going to need some offensive line help as well, and especially with all the with the resources that they've put in to offensive line in the last couple of years. I mean, you probably have at least you still have Rob Havenstein at right tackle, who was a 2nd round pick. They did just sign Trey Jackson, or claim Trey Jackson off waivers from the
wing. They did also announce that they're going to move Greg Robinson to guard, or to right tackle, and Havenstein into guard.
Oh, there you go.
So that was just happened yesterday, actually.
Okay. So Jackson's probably going to be competition, at least for Havenstein.
Yeah.
But I mean, they did sign Andrew Whitworth, which was certainly a really good signing, because Whitworth is still one of the better left tackles in the game. So that should certainly be comforting for Jared Goff. But I think you could still use some talent, weapons-wise. Maybe some receivers, maybe a tight end, unless they feel pretty good about Tyler Higbee, their 4th round pick last year. They did try to beef up edge rushing in free agency. They brought in Connor Barwin, try to revive his career. Locked up with Trumaine Johnson with the franchise tag, but you could probably use help in the secondary as well. So a lot of pieces, I think, that the Rams need, and again, not in a very good position as far as ammunition goes to really address their needs. So they could be in a little bit of trouble here.
Yeah, I totally agree. And they could use center help. Like you mentioned, they need wide receivers. Can maybe use another tight end. Defensively, defensive end. Depending on what Barwin's going to do, is he going to be a linebacker? Is he going to be defensive end? It just depends on how they want to align these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Wade, you're going to put a lot of trust into Wade Phillips, but cornerback, they absolutely need help. They need at least 1 or 2 bodies there. You could probably use, another safety as a backup, linebacker, maybe add another body there. So it's just a lot. It's a lot that piles up, and it's unfortunate. Because this team looked like they were maybe capable of making a playoff run a year ago, and then it just all fell apart so quickly. As soon as the season started, and it's like, oh no. And they had such a poor free agency as far as retaining their own talent. And some of these guys just didn't have good years, and so you understand it, and it was good to churn it, but it's hard because, it opens a lot of holes, and it's not like they were able to land a lot of players to fill those holes. So they've got quite the task worked out for them without having a first-round pick. But if I'm them, they did as good a job as I think they could have with the offensive line. In free agency, I would try to maybe add a center late, somewhere on day 3, which is definitely doable. Center's a position you can get cheaply, but I would look at wide receiver and then edge and cornerback, I think, early.
It's almost crazy to think that this team started 3-1 last season, including a win over the Seahawks, and then things just absolutely crumbled. Just winning one game the rest of the way. Which certainly ultimately led to the midseason firing of Jeff Fisher, which really was long overdue. So that's certainly one thing to watch. That'll be interesting to watch with the Rams, is how Sean McVay, who's only 31 years old, handles the job of being an NFL head coach, being so young. So it'll be, but I think he's ready. He certainly showed that he was one of the better offensive coordinators when he was with Washington, and he's basically going to run the show, at least on offense. And the fact that he brought in Wade Phillips as a defensive coordinator is a home run. I can't wait to watch Aaron Donald in that defense and what Wade Phillips is going to do with him.
Yeah, I think Wade's just going to be a lot of fun with him, and if they can get Tremaine Johnson locked up long term, Donald and Quinn and Johnson are just really fun pieces. Those are the types of players you build around for multiple years, and so if Phillips can get his way and maybe add a couple of ancillary pieces, and just they don't need great stars like next to these guys. They just need solid players. So it'll be interesting to see how much they're willing to invest into that.
The final team in our previews here. It was, not really a long road, but just shows how quick all this goes. The San Francisco 49ers picking at number 2, and needless to say, this team needs an influx of talent. Now, give them credit. They've done what they can so far in free agency, bringing in some decent pieces. Guys like, especially on offensive weapons. Guys like Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin. But overall, they just need really whatever they can get: quarterback, offensive line, defensive line. Probably all 3 levels of the defense. They could use help. They just need the Kyle Juszczyk pickup though. I thought was really nice because he's certainly a nice little chess piece that you can move around and use in different ways. So brought in Tim Hightower as well, which it's been fun to watch the revival of Tim Hightower over the last couple seasons. So, but again, really just whatever you can find. It could almost just be a best player available type scenario for the 49ers at number 2.
Yeah, and I think that they'll end up taking that type of approach this draft. That I don't think they're going to really stress too much about getting a quarterback. If they can, great. Maybe they're the team that takes Deshaun Kaiser if he falls to them at 34. That would be I think that'd be a good pairing as far as skill set and scheme. In fact, I think it'd be a great one. But they're going to have to determine if Kaiser's going to be able to deal with the strong personality that Kyle Shanahan brings. And so, but other than that, though, I think this should be a draft for them. They just prioritize talent. Can they revitalize Josh Garnett, their second first-round pick last year, who was really dreadful? Can they add a little bit more talent to the receiving core? Do they want to add a little bit more talent to the receiving core, or are they? They signed 2 or 3 guys, 3 guys actually. Is that good enough for them? Probably is. They want to add another running back. Do they want to just stock up in that front seven of that defense? They have a lot of ways that they can go, and they have a lot of young players who never really took that next step. So the question is, how quickly are they willing to just continue to add talent and, maybe somewhat give up on recent draft picks because it's a new regime, and so it's fair if they want to. And a lot of this is going to have to be self-scouting, but I think they're in a good position to just kind of play the board here and just get good players.
And that's it. That's 32 teams talked about over 4 weeks. I think we're ready to go, man. I don't know about you, but I'm excited. Well, I know you're excited, obviously.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I really am. And I got some pieces coming out here soon for Bleacher Report,
Nice.
which is kind of nice. Yeah, it's kind of nice to get back in it writing. They're not really fun pieces to write because they're long ones, and one of them's like a redraft of last year's draft.
Nah.
But it's kind of fun. It'll be fun to read. I think it'll be more fun to read than it is to write. But,
I'm sure, yeah.
but yeah, so hopefully people can enjoy that. But it's been cool to get back into it.
And I've got a little bit of news myself, but I feel once I start putting stuff out, I'll announce it. I want to save for when I'm actually starting to do it and start getting stuff out. Ian already knows what it is. I've only told like a couple people, but once I start actually getting stuff out, I'll share with the world what's going on. But I'm pretty excited. Just gotta find some time, get going, and it'll be fun. And it's a great opportunity for me for sure. But I think next week I think we'll do, or at least probably during the week, we'll do some kind of mock draft and maybe just kind of talk about that next week.
Sounds good, man.
Just kind of just our thoughts on where players might end up going and see how well we do predicting the draft, I guess. And it'll be kind of like a final tune-up before the big event. And then after the draft, we'll maybe do a recap. We have a guest that we want to try to get on, kind of talk some draft recap as well. And then probably at some point we'll probably do like we did last season, just kind of hang loose during the summer and then reconvene around July or August, to get ready for the new season.
Yeah, man. I think it's a plan. And that long stretch in the off season, that's pretty painful. It's coming, but it'll end up being worth it. And then season will start, and then we're right back at it again.
It's always worth the wait for sure. So I'm excited, man. So yeah, with that, I think we'll wrap things up here. I think that was another fun show in the books. Thanks as always for sitting down and listening to us, or wherever you may be listening to us and making us part of your podcast rotation. We really appreciate it. And enjoy this final lead up to the draft. Enjoy taking in all the last minute mock drafts and any kind of news and smoke screens. Just remember, don't believe everything you hear when it comes to these reports, because probably about half of them are going to be smoke screens, as Ian knows as well. So, but in any event, enjoy anything you got going on, and we'll catch you right here next week for our big mock draft discussion. So for Ian Wharton, I'm Bill Rossetti. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on GG. Take care, my friends.